Let's finish up this season preview series looking at centers. Myles Turner, Isaiah Jackson, James Wiseman. A lot of questions about defense coming today, but plenty more on today's Locked On Pacers podcast.
You are Locked On Pacers, your daily Indiana Pacers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What up, y'all? Happy Tuesday, and welcome into another edition of the Locked On Pacers podcast, where we, of course, talk about the Indiana Pacers. As always, my name's Tony East. I cover the team for Forbes and SI, and today, lots to discuss, much to discuss as we finish up the off-season preview series by position, diving in to the centers. Myles Turner, James Wiseman, Isaiah Jackson under the microscope in the series that I've been calling What's the Big Deal, fitting for the actual bigs. Today, where we look into a big deal for every player this coming season, why it will matter, what it will take for it to change in a positive way for the Pacers. Spoiler alert, a lot of defense talk on today's episode, but plenty of numbers and stats and details to back it all up. And it's the last day to do this, because today's the last day to preview the season, because tonight the Pacers play. They have a game, 7:30 in Atlanta against the Hawks. So tomorrow, it's going to be talking all about that. In fact, the rest of the week is going to be about real Pacers games against real opponents. So today is the last day for off-season content. We are previewing players. Let's start with Mr. Myles Turner. And I have had this question about him for a while. I think he might have had this question about himself. Fans certainly do. And he kind of touched on it earlier in this training camp. But it is, will the defense ever happen or return? Because when they were drop coverage Pacers, the Nate McMillan Pacers, even kind of the Nate Bjorkgren Pacers, not really, he was awesome, right? One of the best 10 defenders in basketball for 1 year, his absolute apex on that end of the floor. Probably a top 5 defender in the NBA. I believe he finished 5th in Defensive Player of the Year, in 2018-19 when he led the league in blocks, which he did twice. And a lot of that was possible because of the Pacers' defensive scheme. They were top 5, 6, 7, whatever in defense. Those teams, they were good. They were a good defensive team. He was a great defensive player. This team does not cover pick and rolls like that. And the NBA has changed, and players work on shooting more often, and it's so much more prioritized. And the pop and / shooting big is so much more prevalent that drop coverage is not as effective, right? In the dreamiest world ever, you could change pick and roll coverages defensively every single time, depending on the screener and the ball handler, and like some teams try to do that, but that's really hard. And so drop coverage is just much harder to execute in reality anymore. And the Pacers don't do it as much. Turner's up higher. He has to disrupt the ball and recover and all this stuff. And he's fine at it, but he's not nearly as good as he was in drop. And he touched on those scheme changes and what they've meant for his defensive level earlier in camp. So I wonder, what can he get to on a defensive level this year for this iteration of the Pacers and what they're trying to be, right? Last year with the Pacers, they had a net rating way better with Turner on the floor than off, no doubt, like 2.5 points. And their defense was about 1.5 points better with him out there. 2 years ago, their defense was similarly better. Their net rating was similarly better with him out there, but their defense was actually not better with Myles Turner out there. Their bench defense was very good 2 years ago. And then 3 years ago, their defense was super, super better, like really good, 112.3 defensive rating with Turner out there and 118.7 without him. So in the Carlisle era, 2 of the 3 years, they've been better on defense. 1 year significantly so, and every year they've been much better as a team with him out there, right? He's still a very significant part of this team. It's not like he's so tied to defensive success. It's the only way he works, especially now that he's significantly grown offensively. And 2 of the 3 years with Carlisle here, they've been a better defensive team with him out there. But can they get to that first year defensive number, which that was a much different team, obviously. Can they get close to that? Can he be that kind of wrecking ball kind of defender he used to be? And can the Pacers, I think that might be one of the possibility paths to the Pacers getting up to the defensive level that they would like to get to. And I'm not sure we really have a way to learn the answer I truly want to learn to this question, because this team and this modern NBA doesn't really allow the Pacers to go back to drop coverage. So we'll never really know if Myles Turner is still that level of defender in the scheme that he is absolutely amazing at. And they won't and shouldn't probably switch to that scheme. Maybe they should tweak their scheme somewhat, but not in that way. So what I want to know is either if they did, would Turner dominate again, or can he help the Pacers by getting close to that level in their current scheme? And that latter part of that question is much more likely. Now, there's another part to this, though. It's not just all Turner and his own level of impact. It's not like they intentionally neutralized him and made him worse by changing things, right? Some of it's the talents around him and the way the Pacers play. And this is all also very obvious, right? That in a scheme designed to defend guys one-on-one and two-on-two and whatever, that was a big talking point last year in training camp. If there is errors and there has to be rotations, typically the center is the guy closest to the rim who has to clean that error up. And so better surrounding talent on the defensive end helps that kind of player. And guess what? It takes 2 seconds of research to look at two-man lineup data from last year and say, hey, the best defensive partner for Myles Turner last year was Andrew Nembhard, and the second best one was Aaron Nesmith. Wow, I can't believe the 2 best perimeter defenders on the Pacers were the best defensive rating partners for Myles Turner. Duh. The third was Siakam, and fourth was McConnell. I bring that up to say the 2 best perimeter defenders, the 2 next best peskiest, all respectable numbers, all good pairings with Turner. The next guy after that is Tyrese Haliburton. Huge jump in effectiveness down from the McConnell level to the Haliburton level. And Toppin is also right in this mix. And the reason I mention those 2 guys is those are the worst 2 defenders who at some point last season consistently started next to Turner. So they were in lineups where they had better defensive chances because they were playing with Nembhard, Ernie Smith, and Turner more often. So it's not that they themselves are good defenders. That's just situationally. And then you get to Hield, Mathurin, Bruce Brown, Jordan Nwora kind of guys on this defensive rating scale. So I say that to say, hey, look, very obviously, look, we know this. We can watch the games that better perimeter defensive talent with Myles Turner, the Pacers actually are respectable on the defensive end. And so that, combined with their post-All-Star game success last year, All-Star weekend, whatever, on the defensive end makes me think, yeah, it's possible they could get to like 22nd to 20th this year if Turner is that healthy again and that group can defend at the same level they did to close last season, even though I've said on the record a lot that there's so much March flukiness to stats because of how teams operate in the month of March that I don't know, right? We'll see. But if that is true, that they can defend at okay levels and Turner pairs to those guys, that's great. So it's the guys you'd expect, and it's kind of a decently large jump in the net ratings. So I think that signals to me that it's some of both when it comes to Turner, that the current system the Pacers play has changed his effectiveness. It's also partially the talent he has been playing with and will play with in terms of what they're good at and not good at on the defensive end and how that influences what he has to do and how he has to get stops. So I wonder what that can look like this year with similar players, similar scheme, Turner in a contract year. There's just lots of stuff that kind of all floats together and makes me think, hey, the big deal for Turner is, can he get back to being really, really great on the defensive end? People talk so much about the no 3 stuff for the Pacers, right? How that was such a part of their identity last year. They're not going to give up many threes, and they gave up the most points in the paint and at the rim and all that, and that's all true. And some people use that to say, oh, well, what's Myles really doing? And that's stupid. That's a terrible way to evaluate the Pacers. If you watched a single game last year, you'd understand it's not on him, not entirely on him. But they also tweaked away from that scheme, not like they did something totally different, but they switched it up to kind of give up more threes, but not corner threes. They softened it, right? That's kind of how I would describe it. And so they're more comfortable with above the break threes at the expense of now saving some of that drives. So I bet this year they're not number 1 in paint points allowed. Now, to be clear, I bet they're still pretty rough in that stat, but I bet they're not the worst team in the NBA at it. And so can that balance with another year, with the starting lineup that they have playing the full season, with Siakam, with a training camp playing the full season, all that connects to Turner's effectiveness on the end of the floor. How much can that help him up his level on defense in their current system, if at all? Can he change games defensively, or will he just be this kind of deterrent? Because I should have brought this up earlier, but I will never forget this. Those of you who've listened to Locked On Pacers for years, the almost decade the show's been running, will remember this. The 2019 playoffs, Pacers-Celtics. Pacers got smoked. I don't want to talk about how good the team was in that series. I want to talk about something Kyrie Irving said after one of the games in that series in Indiana. He said, man, when that guy Myles Turner comes out of the game, it changes things for us. Like, we're way more comfortable driving. We're not scared to shoot at the rim, right? It changes everything. He was that kind of level of feared defender that Kyrie Irving was like, oh, man, I got to think about driving at Myles Turner. And that's totally changed now, because not both in part because of Turner and talent around him and what he is asked to do on defense. There's so many layers to this. But that quote is seared in my brain, and if Turner or the Pacers or whatever tweaks that can be made between him and his teammates and the system can help him get closer to that level on that end, I think that would go a long way to helping the Pacers achieve the goals they want, especially on the defensive end, because we've seen the last 2 years, he can be the offensive player he said he could be. Now, can he blend that with the defensive player he once was? If he can't, that's still a very, very good player. A well above average defensive player and a good offensive center is a really good player. But I wonder if he can sniff back to that like OMG level defensive player. And we'll see if it's even possible with the way that the Pacers play. Let's move to Turner's backup, Mr. Isaiah Jackson. Unfortunately, we haven't seen him yet because of his injuries in camp. But let's talk about year 4 for a player who's also headed into a contract year. Big storyline for the Pacers, the center position this year. Before we talk some Isaiah Jackson, we need to talk about the lovely folks over at FanDuel. NFL fans, what a week. Crazy high-scoring NFL games. You can start to get in on the action of all that football with a big return on FanDuel. They are America's #1 sportsbook. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more, all on the same page where you place your bets. That is what you want with convenience. Don't flip around from thing to thing. There's the stats. There's the play-by-play. You know the timing to execute your hunch. You know what the stats say you should and shouldn't be doing. That's the perfect thing for that experience. And on FanDuel, you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. To get all that, you know the deal. That's just go to FanDuel.com. We are back here on Locked On Pacers. Thanks for making us your first listen today. And every single day, your second listen. There's games happening, so if you're interested in something that's happening, I would recommend Locked On Rockets. Jalen Green looked really good. I'm kind of in on the Rockets this year. I love Amen Thompson. Locked On Rockets with Jackson Gatlin would be a good place to go. Locked On Wizards, because Malcolm Brogdon's hurt. What's going on there? You can hear about that over at Locked On Wizards. Finally, NBA actual storylines to talk about. Okay, let's continue with the centers. Talking about Mr. Isaiah Jackson. Looking back at last year, a lot went into his improvement career year. Much of the belief in him has changed for lots of reasons. You could point to any number of stats that you believe to be the most important one for Isaiah Jackson's growth last year, and I'd say, yeah, that mattered a great deal. He got better at lots of stuff, even if the per-game numbers don't show it, because he had a career low minutes per game as a result of Jalen Smith being better and Myles Turner being healthier. And so I kind of have Isaiah Jackson's question as two questions. It's really one question split into two parts, but it kind of is one. It's kind of two questions to make it happen. And that is how much of his improvement going forward can come from doing less bad stuff versus doing more good stuff. So it's been very well documented how I felt about this last year, because if you just were a stat truther, you would look at Isaiah Jackson's fouls per 36 minutes. A big problem for him. He is very foul prone. Almost 6 per 36 his whole career. Last year, career high fouls per 36 minutes, 6.4. But you can dive into foul data through play-by-play data, and you can see that they were, air quotes, better fouls. He had way less stupid off the ball away from the play fouls. He had less illegal screens. He had less charges. So many more of his fouls last year were shooting fouls. Not good. To be clear, fouls are bad. They're literally an infraction. But that is the best kind of fouls. Sometimes you're preventing a made shot. Good, right? That is the best reason to have a foul, is a defensive shooting foul that prevents him making the other team. And that was a much higher percentage of his fouls last year. That's still an improvement, even in an imperfect way. And so I bring that up to say, let me explain what I mean by less bad stuff getting cut out, like that. He cut out the stupid fouls last year. Smarter fouls, still a lot though, right? But can he get better at that kind of stuff? Turnovers did not get any better last year. In fact, advanced numbers, turnover percentage, went up last season, despite his usage going down, right? That would be something else I consider, cutting out the bad, right? Isaiah Jackson, with how much he has the ball, if his turnover rate could be below 10%, that would be terrific, right? That's another way that he could be better, just by cutting out a few kind of plays. I don't really have a good word for him besides just making a noise. That would go a long way for him. And he got a lot better at that last year and was way more effective. And so, turnover rate, his turnover percentage did go up, but also his assist percentage went up. And that was my transition into saying part of what made him better last year, beyond the cutting out the bad plays, was way more good plays at the same time, right? 68.9% true shooting. Wow. That's insanely good, right? That's awesome. Career high rebound rate. Awesome. Career high assist rate. Awesome. Right? These are things you want to see from a developing player like Isaiah Jackson. By far his most impactful offensive year. If you want to dive into those numbers, you could easily go, whoa, 2-point percentage, 67.7%. Very good. Right? So he got much better at actually putting the ball in the basket. Sounds very obvious, but that was a big part of his development last year. You can dig into the shooting stats and see a lot of that was his at the rim shooting, but he did well from like mid-range and in-ish. And that's all very important. And that made him playoff viable, was that at the level of mistakes they were willing to live with for Jackson, he could outweigh them in the postseason with successful plays. 53.5% from the field isn't awesome, but it's good. It's above, if you're making over half your shots in the playoff, that's fine for a post player. And he was really, really terrific in that Knicks series where he was really expanding his range in a way that the Knicks just were unprepared for. He was flipping shots from farther away that whole series. His shooting percentage was not nearly as high against Boston, and he only made 2 shots the entire Bucks series. But every game of the Knicks series, he was at or above 50% from the field. 4 for 6, 2 for 4, 2 for 3, 4 for 8, 0 for 0, 2 for 2, and 3 for 3. In fact, the last 3 games, not missing a shot at all in that series. So really his coming out party of the playoffs at that time. What is next for that kind of player? Is it, because this is like the O'Shea Brissett, Ben Shepherd-y route, where Isaiah Jackson does a lot of the good stuff he did last year, but cuts down his foul rate, gets down to 5 per 36, right? 5.3 was his number 2 years ago. Can he get just a little below that? Show signs of progress from fouling. Can he get to 5? Can he not have as many turnovers? Can his turnover rate drop as his usage rate stabilizes or even goes up potentially, since he'll be the likely opening night backup and could hold that role for a while, right? These are other ways he could be better and make fewer mistakes. Or does it come with, hey, the true shooting approaches 70 or the rebounding rate approaches 20, right? Because it does kind of seem like with the bench unit that the Pacers have, his offensive role is not going to get any bigger. It's not like there's a max level Isaiah Jackson they're chasing, but he's one of the best vertical threats on the team. He's pretty quick. He can do lots of stuff. The next Isaiah Jackson steps are kind of unclear to me. Not because I don't think he can get better, because I just don't know what that looks like. And that's why my question about his improvement is, what is it? Is it a path of cutting down on bad or a path of getting a lot better at the good? Because last year there were signs it could be both. It could be both. A really disciplined Isaiah Jackson is a quite good player, right? We've seen this in the past where I always bring up the Bulls. I can't do anymore. DeMar DeRozan's not on the Bulls, but he used to do better defending DeMar DeRozan than Nikola Vucevic. And every once in a while he'd plot a game where he looked really sensational, in moments like that where he'd get on a switch and do awesome on defense or finish a bunch of plays above the rim as a lob guy or just be really impactful. And a really disciplined version of that kind of player is really good. And it's possible he expands all that a bit, especially his range. He's tried. He's mentioned working with Jenny Busick on his jumper. I saw him taking threes. At the very first practice we walked into, I'm just kind of assessing who's where and who they're working with, and I thought, whoa, Isaiah Jackson's taking threes. I don't know how many I expect him to take this year. He's taken 34 his whole career. He took 4 last year total. He didn't make a single one. I don't know if that number should get more than like 40 at most on a season, unless he's much better at them. But that is one way he just gets better. It doesn't matter if he cuts out as much bad stuff if he's a better shooter. And his rebound rate has kept climbing his whole career. And his assist rate has kept climbing his whole career. He's just better at a lot of stuff. And he's a really good switch defender. He's good at the nail when he stunts in. Right, his on-ball defense is much better than his team defense. But we all know what Isaiah Jackson is and how he's gotten better and how he's earned this opportunity to be the Pacers' backup center. Truly, he earned it last year and then kind of gave it away. Now I want to know what the next steps look like. And I'd wager that for getting paid, because this is a contract year for him heading into restricted free agency, adding skill is more important in terms of the variety of teams that could pay you if you can do this or that. Oh, they believe that you could be the backup 5 and do this. Or this other team thinks you could be the backup 5 but do that. So adding skill adds to that sales pitch. But for the Pacers specifically, I think being a little more precise in the stuff he's already good at and cutting out some of those bad things would probably be the best thing for the Pacers. So what this season looks like for Jackson might depend on that kind of factor, and I could understand both from him, right? It's not like if he focused on getting more variety in his game, that'd be bad for the Pacers. He'll still be a better player, so I'll be very curious what he looks like. It's a little like Nesmith and Toppin. These are the hardest players for me in this particular exercise that I created, where it's clear what that player is and what they should be, and their role probably shouldn't grow from where it is right now, and yet you don't want to box them in and say this is what they are. They're all young or inexperienced or whatever, so it just makes it hard to come up with a question of like what you really want to see besides just like, can this player be better? Like, that's boring. And so with Isaiah Jackson in particular, where he got better last year in some unique ways to see improvement from a player, I wonder what the next steps of that are and what that could look like as he transitions into being the backup 5. He's not shifting the role with Jalen Smith anymore. Perhaps James Wiseman comes in and says, no, I want a chance at this. But Rick Carlisle said it. Isaiah Jackson's their backup 5. We'll see what that looks like when the season starts. And speaking of James Wiseman, I have questions about James Wiseman. And digging into the numbers, as I did already once for him this offseason, paint the same picture that we had with Wiseman right when the Pacers signed him. The same picture that we talked about, with Wiseman right when the Pacers signed him. Let's talk more about defense like we did with Turner, but in a much different way to close out this show on a James Wiseman discussion. Before we talk some Wiseman, we have to talk about Gametime, the best way to get tickets to the sports, music, theater, comedy, whatever you're going to near you. Gametime is the way to do it. No more guesswork. No more troubling processes. This is the way to do it. They have super deals. They have seat views right in the app before you buy, so you know what you're going to see. The only time that I used the seat view feature, it was perfect. Absolutely perfect. Curated deals to make it easier to find the best prices. Their lowest price guarantee, their event cancellation policy, and their job loss protection are some of my favorite app features too, and why you would also love it. Plus, they have a new feature called Gametime Picks that makes getting tickets even easier, filtering out the fluff so you only get incredible deals. You can toggle off the hidden junk so you can see the real price the whole time. That also spot on when I did this. It is just the best way to get tickets because it takes the guesswork out of the process. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Download Gametime today. What time is it? Gametime. And we're back here on Locked On Pacers. Thanks for making us your first listen today and every single day. If you're interested in the demise of the Las Vegas Aces and potentially the Lynx or the Sun, Locked On Women's Basketball is the way to go. And if you're interested in other NBA teams and what's going on there, Locked On Magic, big extension for Wendell Carter Jr. Earlier today, at least reported by Shams Charania of the ESPN. Whoa, big move in the newsbreaker landscape. So you're going to hear Shams of ESPN on this podcast a lot. If you're just finding that out for me, I think that's kind of funny for some reason. But yeah, that's the most natural landing spot for him. He'll do great. I met Shams a few times. Nice guy. Always says hi. Appreciate it. Let's finish this up with some James Wiseman chatter. James Wiseman, what's the big deal? Can he guard at all? I mean, look, people have rightly said there's context needed to his defensive numbers, and I'm willing to hear them out. I did not do a full deep dive into he played with these four guys, or he would never with this guy, or he's always with that guy with Detroit or Golden State. So I'm not as nuanced with those teams as I am with the Pacers. Obviously, I covered them, but let's just walk through the trend together. Okay, last year with the Pistons, 3.5 points per 100 possessions worse on defense with Wiseman on the floor. 2 years ago with Detroit, which is like a quarter of the season. So comically small sample. I'm not going to read too much into this. 4.5 points per 100 possessions worse with Wiseman on the floor. Golden State, that same season, but that was like 2/3 of the season before he got traded. They were 12 points per 100 possessions worse on defense with Wiseman on the floor than off. And then his rookie year, which whatever, rookies suck on defense. I'm not going to fault him for this, but 3.1 points per 100 possessions worse. So look, he came off the bench for all those teams. Well, he started at Golden State for sometimes. So generally the starter is going to have a better defensive center or better defensive talent, like with the Pacers, right? So some of that number is not related to him, but that is a trend of every year of his career that his team has defended worse with him out there. Now, the offensive part of that is not reality, which is part of his appeal, is that he can be an awesome offensive player and has very clear this guy's huge and fast skill set that makes him very appealing, right? I ran through how he can help the Pacers thing, and his offense was good. Now, I don't think he's such a negative suck on defense that the numbers indicate, and I'll get to that in a second, but that is a trend that has happened in his career. Can that be avoided with the Pacers? Can they at least maintain or be close? Like last year's Pacers team had some good success defensively with Jalen Smith out there. I'm going to use Jalen Smith because he was the primary backup 5 for much of the season last year. Pacers defense was definitely worse with him out there, but survivably worse, right? Definitely worse, but survivably worse. Isaiah Jackson, with him out there compared to not out there, the Pacers defense was actually better with him out there than not out there, right? He was an impactful defender, as we've seen with his ability to switch and disrupt stuff, right? So different stories there. Smith was a negative impact defender in this particular stat, not the end-all be-all. Jackson was positive. So what can this look like for James Wiseman, right? I'm not going to do the context research for those teams. If someone wants to point them out to me, please do. If you say, oh, it's because his teammates were bad at defense that hurt him. Yeah, well, with the Pacers, that same problem is going to be the case. So the thing that pops in the positive way for him is like he has a pretty good block rate, like a pretty decent one. It's above 3% his whole career. And if you go back and listen to the How He Can Help podcast episode that from August, I believe I wrote about this too, like when he is actually in position or he is defending a post-up, whatever, in that kind of reality, or when he's close enough to the play that he can make something happen on defense, he is disruptive in those plays. Like that is positive James Wiseman impact on defense. The problem is it's not all the time, and that's the case for a lot of young bigs. It's hard to keep up with that kind of stuff. That's not always the case. And so to me, for him, when you watch the tape, it's team defense. It's being in the right spots, rotating on time, over and over and over again. Sometimes he does it, sometimes he doesn't. And he's a good rebounder, so when the miss is forced, he's a very effective player there. But the miss has to be forced, and that's where his teams have had some trouble. A lot of these on-off stats are because efficiency goes up for the other team, right? And that a lot of those numbers I just said will also be hard to contextualize with the Pacers. He will be playing with some substandard defenders this year with this team, right? So it might be hard to kind of separate those in reality, but we'll be able to see the games and see the film and see how this goes. So I am dying to know if James Wiseman can be better on that end this year, because at his size and speed, he'll always be serviceable enough on offense. Always. You can run past guys or back them down and put them under the rim, and you have just a little bit of touch 8 feet in. Yeah, you can fit on offense in any group and provide spacing vertically and be huge enough to set decent screens. Yeah, you're going to help, right? No doubt. Duh. I don't need to talk about that too much. But you got to guard at some point. Every player does. And big is the hardest position to adapt to and learn. And this is now his third system. It's hard. We talked about that with Myles Turner. But he's got to figure it out. That has to be a thing for him this year, as he's talked about coming to the Pacers for development. Well, Isaiah Jackson's defense got better with the Pacers, and Jalen Smith's certainly improved, especially as a rebounder, right? Can James Wiseman take that approach to this? Can he improve on that end of the floor? If he's playing with McConnell, that will lift TJ McConnell, right? That vertical spacing will help. They will pair well on offense, especially if Wiseman sets good screens this year. And something else that's the case on offense that has not always, but sometimes been the case for James Wiseman, is a spacing 4, like Obi Toppin. That's going to help him, right? But what's that mean for defense? Can he get enough stops that it matters? Can he help with enough stops that it matters? Jackson can switch. Jackson can be disruptive on defense and do stuff. We know Myles Turner, despite not being what he used to be for the reasons we talked about at the start of the show, can be terrific on that end, right? Can James Wiseman do any of that stuff? Rebounding can matter, like I said, but you got to get the stops to rebound. And so my question is, can the team defend well enough with him out there? And what is his role in making that happen? He was all right in FanJam. I mean it. He was all right in FanJam on the defensive end, at least being in the right plays. But you're playing against your own team. You know their sets and style and plays. What does this look like when they play the Hawks tonight or the Cavs on Thursday or any other other opponent? That's what I want to see from James Wiseman. I think what the Pacers want to see from James Wiseman and what James Wiseman wants to see from James Wiseman. Really looking forward to that, seeing how it goes, what it means for his potential long-term prospectus with the Pacers. That is the series. That's everybody. We've covered everybody, which means we're done with the off-season. They play tonight. Can't wait. Pacers-Hawks. If you want more preseason preview content, yesterday's podcast with Zach Pearson, we looked at all the stuff you might want to watch out for in the preseason. So tomorrow night, that's all we're talking about. Pacers-Hawks, what happened, what was surprising, who looked good, who didn't, how much does it actually matter? Keep that in mind in the preseason. But it's games. It's something to talk about. And then they play another one right after that, and then we'll talk about the early impressions from 2 Pacers games on Friday. We'll just keep right rolling with games and new stuff as the preseason progresses. Hope you guys enjoyed today's episode and this whole series. I enjoyed deep diving into these players even more. I do this anyway, but it's fun to put the notes down, share it with you guys, and then see how it manifests during the season. If you have any questions about anything I said or think I said something dumb, Tony R. East is a good way to reach me, or commenting down below on YouTube. This podcast is on Twitter at Locked On Pacers. Thank you guys for rocking with me all offseason long. Let's watch and talk about some Pacers basketball. Till then, everybody have a wonderful day.